Okay, welcome everyone to the Nairobi City Independent Food System Dialogue. Thank you for joining us today, and we are ready to kick off. And as more of our guests join us, we'll be able to get them on board and updated on what has been going on so far. So I would like to hand this over to Ryan to make the opening, as well as let us know about the program and some of the speakers that will be present today. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Solofina, and a very good morning to all participants joining us, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I know we are global this morning. We have representation from across the globe, and we'll introduce them shortly. But yeah, again, very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Ryan Fisher. I'm a professional officer in biodiversity and urban systems with Equitable Africa, based in Cape Town, South Africa. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the Nairobi Independent Food Systems Dialogue this morning. Very excited to have you with us. Just before we begin, just a couple of house rules, just that we all are on the same page. Before we begin, I would just like to remind you of our dialogue protocols. So firstly, just to mention that the session is being recorded, and for participating, you are consenting to being recorded. I must note that the recording will not be used outside of the scope of this project, and essentially is for record keeping, of course, and to ensure that we don't miss anything when we do the reporting. So just to make that clear. Just to also mention that when we do enter periods of discussion today, it's really going to be not the talk shop with all our stop presentations, but really it's all in the name. It's to have an engaging dialogue. So when we do have discussions, we hope you will eagerly participate. For plenary discussions, you are more than welcome to raise your hand. And when called upon, please unmute yourself. You're more than welcome to also switch on your video to show us what you look like. But yeah, just to reiterate, please do engage as freely as possible. We also welcome active discussion in our chat boxes. Please do take the time to introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining us from, your organization, perhaps your favorite food, but please do engage, share comments, ask questions. Please do make the session your own. And then when presenting, just a note to our presenters, to please stick to the allocated time of approximately 8 minutes. I think Solofina, as the main facilitator, is going to be quite strict on that. And then, of course, the recording of the session, together with an outcomes report, will be made available to all participants after the event. It has been quite a journey to get this far. We went through quite a stringent planning process, of course, led by us as Equitable Africa, but really with key inputs from our FAO counterparts, from head office in Rome specifically, and of course the FAO Kenya representatives as well, playing a key role in setting up this dialogue. And then, of course, the Kenya Food Rights Alliance and Growth Partners Africa as well, another key partner to this dialogue. So just a big thank you, and I guess congratulations to everyone for getting us this far. Just to give you a sense of the speakers who will be sharing with us today. So as I mentioned, I introduced myself as Ryan Fisher. We are very pleased to be joined by Excellency Mwenda, the acting governor of Nairobi County. Welcome, ma'am, and thank you for joining us, and we'll hear from my Excellency in a few minutes. Mrs. Carla Mukavi, who's the FAO country representative of Kenya. Justice Katenge, Nairobi City County Chief Officer. Welcome. Representation from Izmir, City of Izmir in Turkey. Mr. Guven, very warm welcome to you. Dr. Daniel Maingi, who's from the Growth Partners Africa and Kenya Food Rights Alliance. Welcome, sir. Josephat Kariuki, Policy Officer, FAO Kenya, and then Dr. Daniel Karugu, who's the Country Director of Food Systems. So a very warm welcome to our speakers. Looking forward to the interventions, and then of course that will set us up quite nicely for our discussions and the remainder of the dialogue. Just in terms of the agenda, so we're currently embarking on the official opening, and we'll hear from Her Excellency and FAO country representative in a while. And then, of course, we'll just give everyone a short overview of why we are here today, and leading up, of course, towards the UN Food Systems Summit in September. A little bit of setting the scene, and then it gets real interesting and the meat of the discussion when we break into virtual breakout rooms for in-depth discussions. And then, of course, we'll touch a little bit on specific actions and commitments for Nairobi towards the summit before we close off the session a little bit later today. So just for those of you who are not familiar with ICLEI and who we even are, just to say that ICLEI is a network based organization, and our network and members consist of local governments, local government associations, local governments, big and small, regions, provinces, the likes, and all committed to sustainable development. And really, our belief is that the rubber hits the road at the local level in terms of driving sustainable development globally, and that has really been our mandate and at the core of our focus since we were founded in 1990 by cities, for cities. So the network keeps growing. We're now more than 1,750 local and regional governments committed to urban development, as I mentioned, and we are active in 100 plus countries across the continent. So as I mentioned, a global organization, but we're very active on all the continents, and as I mentioned at the beginning, ICLEI Africa Secretariat, who services the Africa continent, and our members there. We're based in Cape Town, South Africa, and there's a couple of my colleagues on the call as well, who you'll most likely meet in the breakout sessions a little bit later. Just a little bit on why we're here. So the 2021 Africa City Food Exchange is really meant, and the core objective is elevating the voices of our cities, leading up to the summit in September this year. And really, it's a phased approach. So we're having these independent dialogues in a number of cities globally, majority of which are in Africa. And I'll show you a little bit that list in a short while. But really, phase one is really to have these what we call independent dialogues, which we're embarking on today, which will then feed into city-to-city exchanges in the next couple of months, and as part of particularly Africa's Africa City Food Month, which will then ultimately feed into the pre-summit in July and the main event in September. So the exchange is really to elevate and ensure that the voices and actions and commitments of our cities really are at the forefront of the summit come September. And then, of course, just a big thank you, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, to the partners that made the dialogue possible today. So, of course, FAO, both at the global level, but of course our Kenya colleagues. Big thank you, of course, the Nairobi City County for their commitment to this process and for being involved today, and then of course the Kenya Food Rights Alliance. So just a big thank you to all the partners involved in this process. In terms of the urban food systems dialogues, as I mentioned, this forms part of a bigger process, but really the objective, as I mentioned a couple of times, is to ensure that what is happening at the local level informs the summit in September. And really, I mean, there's of course million ways to do that, but the key objectives of the dialogues is essentially to highlight the role that our cities are playing throughout the food system value chain, to generate in-depth discussions And I think that's why today is so important, is that we don't just have city officials or representatives, but really um, a good representation of key stakeholders across the food system of Nairobi. So I think this then allows us to have quite in-depth and interesting and positive discussions, and which will hopefully lead to certain action and commitments from our cities towards food systems reforms. And then, as I mentioned, to connect these dialogues with the UNFSS member state summit dialogue. So there's a whole host of national level dialogues that's happening at country level, and it's of course important for us to ensure that vertical alignment between these local independent dialogues and those national dialogues, of course, to ensure maximum impact at the summit later on this year. And then, of course, I think probably most of the important dialogues is, I think the question is with the summit, what happens after the summit? And we're together with our partners, FAO and others, are quite committed to ensuring that there's lasting collaboration beyond the summit and beyond these processes. And there's various platforms, of course, on which that happens. The City Food Network of ICLEI and RUAF, the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, and others that's of course quite active in this space already. So just to give you a sense of the roadmap leading up towards September. So as I mentioned, phase one is having these engagements in a number of cities, and you will see on the left of the slide, there's a list of cities. You will see good representation across the continent, and I think that lends itself to good lessons learned there. And then, of course, phase two, as I mentioned, as part of the Africa City Food Month, will be to do some matchmaking. So using the outcomes of these dialogues to see how we can link some of our cities together to continue the conversation and co-learning in July. And then, of course, that process in itself will then as well feed into informing the summit in September, and then using the City Food Network and other platforms to continue the momentum post the summit. So that is just a snapshot of where we are at the moment. I think that March to May should probably be changed to June as well, because we're still going to have these engagements running to June as well. So quite exciting, and looking forward to sharing the outcomes with you all. Just in terms of the summit and what the summit will focus on, and I guess the key objectives of both the summit, but really has gone a long way in informing our dialogues as well, is these action tracks. And action tracks is obviously designed to address possible trade-offs with other tracks and to identify solutions that can deliver wide-ranging benefits. But I think also important to mention that these action tracks are by no means exhaustive. I think they are obviously interlinked, and that's why we've found it out through a number of our dialogues that we've had thus far, is that people perhaps feel that it's difficult to focus on one action track because they are so interlinked. But I think that is exactly the point, is that if, for example, if we delve into and really focus on one of the action tracks, I think it's then easier to make the links with others. So as I mentioned, this is by no means exhaustive of the urban food system, but I think it lends itself to as at least as a framework to guide the thinking and input from cities, as I say, to inform the summit later this year. So you might already be familiar with them, but of course, action track one is to ensure access to safe and nutritious food for all. Shift to sustainable consumption patterns, action track two, and of course a link to nature, to boost nature positive production, action track three. Equitable livelihoods, I think that's a big one, and a big interest for a lot of our cities, action track four. And then I think particularly in light of the situation that we're finding ourselves in with COVID over the last year or so, is really thinking about and really committed to building resilience to vulnerability, shocks and stresses of the food system in our cities as action track 4. So if you need more information on these action tracks and perhaps where they originated from, etc., I think we have a number of our FAO colleagues together with our ICLEI colleagues and other partners who will happily explain that to you further. Just before I move on, we are going to have breakout sessions a little bit later, in which we will, of course, break up this plenary room into various breakout rooms. So I think my colleague Daniel has shared some guidance on what the rooms the virtual breakout rooms, each room will focus on. Um, I think, Daniel, you might have to paste it again as people um, might have joined late, but we do ask that all participants please rename themselves to reflect and indicate your breakout room of choice. So you would see some participants on the call have already done so. You will see a couple of B1s, B3s, B4s next to people's names. So please do take a minute to read the information as shared by Daniel Adini in the chat, and just to get a sense of what each breakout room will focus on. And then please do rename yourself to reflect which breakout room you are interested in. If you have any troubles doing so, just a little bit of guidance. So if you do, you will see at the bottom of your taskbar where it says participants. If you click on participants and you go to your name in that list, if you hover your cursor over your name, you will see there's either an option to mute yourself or there's an option for more. If you click on more, there's an option to rename, and that's where you just then just add either B1 to B4 next to your name, depending on which breakout session you are interested in. So as I mentioned, I see a couple of people have done so already. I think what we and the team will do is just to prompt you when you haven't yet done so. But yeah, if you have any issues doing so, please just let us know in the chat and we'll be happy to support. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Sarafina, who's going to be our main facilitator for the day and guide us through the program further. So again, a very big thank you for joining us. Welcome, and please do enjoy the session with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for this. And really, at this point is when we want to officially start our program. Thank you for the background information that will really guide us during the discussions today. So, without further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to invite the acting governor to give the opening for our dialogue. I'd like to please invite Her Excellency Anne Kananu Mwenda. Please welcome, and we're really looking forward. We're honored that you could join the dialogue and that you could provide the space for Nairobi City County to host this dialogue. So thank you very much, and I would like to welcome you to offer an official opening for our dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry the acting governor could not make it because she has a cold and she's lost her voice. But
No,
she's
sorry
told
about
me
that.
to give her remarks. My name is Dr. Jairus Musumba, the acting county secretary, Nairobi City County Government. So if I'm allowed, can I read her remarks?
Please go ahead, and thank you very much for representing our governor. And I will make sure that that we're able to give you the right feedback to get back to the governor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll read verbatim. Representatives from ICLAI and FAO, members of the county assembly present, members of the county executive present, invited stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to the Nairobi Independent Food System Dialogue. This dialogue will enable my government gather valuable views from all of you. The guiding theme of our discussion is towards a future of food that is sustainable, equitable, and secure in Nairobi City County. The views of our engagement will be presented to the national dialogue in the coming few months, and will also form the discussion during the 2021 African City Food Exchange, which will be convened by FAO, ISLEI Africa, and other partners. Our voices will be heard during the UN Food Summit, which is scheduled to take place before the close of this year. Ladies and gentlemen, this dialogue has come at the right time when my government, through the support of our FAO, is at the final stage of approval of an elaborate food system strategy document, which is a sure way of working towards a future of food that is sustainable, equitable, and secure for all Nairobi residents. The Nairobi City County Food System Strategy is an enabler to inclusive and more efficient agricultural and food systems at local, national, and international levels. It will also ensure attainment of consistent food security for Nairobi City residents while safeguarding the commercial interests of the food industry entrepreneurs. You are invited to download the food system document of the Nairobi City County website and familiarize yourself with it in preparation for a fruitful engagement during the upcoming public participation on this document. Ladies and gentlemen, in line with the National Food and Nutritional Security Policy and the President's Big Four agenda, particularly on food security, I wish to assure you of my government's commitment to finding a workable solution of the nourishing Nairobi rapidly growing population. I do, however, acknowledge that achieving this noble goal requires a combination of interconnected actions at the local, national, regional, and global levels. I am grateful to FAO and ISLEI for your continued support and encouragement. And I encourage other partners to join us in our journey to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition by the year 2030, in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 2. To realize these sustainable development goals, the global food system needs to be reshaped to be more productive, more inclusive of poor and marginalized populations, environmentally sustainable and resilient, and able to deliver healthy and nutritious diets to all. Before I conclude, I would like to reiterate that my government is fully committed to supporting the finalization of the food system strategy document and implementing the strategies therein. To our partners, FAO and ISLEI, thank you once again for working with us. Let us continue working together to feed the citizens of Nairobi City, Kenya, and the world at large. I wish you all fruitful deliberations. Thank you, and God bless you all. Signed, Her Excellency Ann K. Mwenda, Deputy Governor and Acting Governor, Nairobi City County Government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musumba, for those very strong and encouraging words from the acting governor. And we really feel that she is well represented, from the different officials here present, but then also from you that is carrying this very encouraging message from her. So, and I think you really importantly you note the fact that Nairobi is beginning its journey of defining what urban foods governance is. I think, and one of the steps here is by launching the Nairobi County Food System Strategy. And I think really beginning this process of inviting in stakeholders as the draft is still as the draft is out and being finalized and refined, I think it's very, very valuable. And we'll note that in some of our discussion is really trying to understand where the strategy is at in relation to, first of all, the vision for Nairobi, but then also linking this vision to the urban food agenda, to really attaining systemic sustainability at local level. And I think you also highlight issues around the county prioritizing achieving food security, but then also securing livelihoods and also attaining wholesome nutrition for its citizens. So I think keeping this in mind and some of the priorities that the city would like to achieve, I think this really gives us a good opening to start the dialogue. Thank you very much, and please please convey our thanks to the acting governor. And I think to all our stakeholders present, we are ready to start the dialogue. And at this juncture, I
Thank
would
you.
like to, no, thank you very much, Dr. Musumba. And at this juncture, I would like to invite the FAO country representative for Kenya to also give us the opening remarks. FAO is a strong partner in this dialogue and has been able to really to bring the voices down to the local level for different city actors. And I think to us importantly is how is this process linking to the global UNFSS summit processes. Welcome, Mrs. Kala, and we're really eager to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salofina, our dear moderator. I also want to start by recognizing the Acting Country Secretary, Dr. Msumba, all stakeholders here represented, all protocol observed. Allow me to begin by sincerely thanking the organizers of this important session as part of the grassroots level sub-dialogues being staged across the country and building into the national dialogue on food systems later next month. On this front, I would like to recognize the role played by the national government through the Ministry of Agriculture, led by the national convener, Honorable Cabinet Secretary, and the Nairobi County leadership, led by Her Excellency the Governor. In both the instances of planning and progress, they have really partnered closely with the FAO and ICLAI, and I really want to recognize that. As you may be aware, food systems issue is a complex web of activities ranging from production, processing, movement to consumption. It is a chain approach, and worse still, the chain has sub-chains and many tributaries that must all be brought to the surface. The complexity gets even deeper when we talk about an urban setting, and especially a huge city like Nairobi. So such discussion requires dialogue such as this one that really brings together all stakeholders. And it is for this reason that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres decided to convene a food system summit as part of the decade of actions to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, by 2030. The introduction by Ryan was also very clear about it. The summit will launch bold new actions to deliver progress on all 17 SDGs, each of which relies to some degree on healthier, more sustainable, and equitable food systems. The summit will really awaken the world to the fact that we all must work together to transform the way the world produces, consumes, and think about food. And guided by the 5 action tracks, the summit will bring together key players from the world of science, business, policymakers, healthcare, academia, as well as farmers, indigenous people, youth organization, consumers groups, environmental activists, and other key stakeholders. The food system dialogue gets even more complex when considered under a urban setting like Nairobi. Therefore, the Nairobi dialogue really presents us with a unique opportunity to deliberately target food systems and all its elements, be they influenced from within or without the city itself. It's really an opportunity to look at the entire value chain from its tail to the head and how it affects our beloved city's food and nutrition security. We at the FAO, we christianize it as the farm to fork concept. So under this concept, and as your partner in the dialogues, FAO in partnership with the ICLAI we acknowledge the dynamics in the food systems within the Nairobi City County, being poorly urban. And as such, the focus is for Nairobi to discuss those dynamics, especially on governance of the food systems. And this includes the interaction between the city and the surrounding counties in terms of food flows, urbanization, trends, population growth, and the migration into the city, urban diet and consumption patterns that bring about those dynamics in the food systems. Those are key issues that we must confront during this dialogue and at the national level. In fact, I should really say that those are issues which conversation should continue way beyond the dialogues and as we really move forward, even beyond the summit. So, distinguished participants, besides coming at the right, I would say that really this conversation is coming at the right time because it really brings another critical angle to tackling our food and nutrition security. They have been designed to recognize and align with existing policies and strategies to which they are poised to inform and enrich. They are inclusive dialogues reflecting on the United Nations slogans of leaving no one behind. In Nairobi City, for instance, the dialogue will shed light on a number of issues that will help the city as it develop a resilient food system that is envisioned in the Nairobi food system strategy of affordable, accessible, nutritious, and safe food for all Nairobi City residents. And from here, the discussion will be linked to various United Nations Food System Summit action tracks to form the case for the Nairobi City Regional Dialogue as the voice of the cities, the urban food systems component. And later, of course, scale up during the national dialogues that are expected to result into the shaping of national pathways to sustainable food systems. So it is really our hope that by then we will have a rich pool of ideas going to the summit. So let me really conclude by saying that as FAO, I'm glad to say that we are already supporting the Nairobi County on addressing challenges in food systems governance with the 3-year urban food systems project and the recently launched Green Cities Initiative. And we intend to continue on this path together with the city leadership and all Kenyans who are city residents of Nairobi and not only. So let me conclude by really thanking and really wish that we have a very, very fruitful dialogue as we move to the national one and to the summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mukavi, for really contextualizing us, letting us know where we are at in the entire process. And I think I would like to, drawing from your comments, I would like to note that really the stakeholder participation in the Nairobi dialogue has been quite big and diverse, and that really shows us the interest of different stakeholders across the food value chain in Nairobi County to discuss, but then also be involved in understanding where the direction for food is within the city. So thank you very much for that opening. And as we begin a dialogue officially, I think I would like to, at this very juncture, we're going to really understanding the scene, understanding Nairobi as a county and where food governance is at the moment, but then to also learn from Izmir municipality in Turkey, you know, how far have they gone with food systems governance and what are the lessons that we can learn and share from each other. So at this juncture, I would like to invite Mr. Katege of Justus from who is the Nairobi City County Chief Officer, to please help us understand what are some of those key elements of the Nairobi City Food County Strategy. What are those key elements of the Nairobi City Food County Strategy, and really how this is trying to link into the issues surrounding sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Urban Food Agenda. Thank you very much. Handing over to you, Mr. Katenge. Just to check if Mr. Katenge is on the line with us. But if not, I think at this juncture, maybe this is the moment where we start the other way around, trying to understand. Yes, please.
Just as Katenge is with us, I think he's unmuted. I think he's talking, but we can't hear him. He needs to unmute.
All right, just one moment. Let me unmute.
Hello.
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 We can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry for that. I'm just as Katenge, the current Chief Officer for Nairobi City County Food, Agriculture, and Forestry. I think I need, first of all, to thank you and tell you that I'm joining this dialogue for the first time as the Chief Officer. And I'm going through the strategy, and it brings out very interesting factors which we need. This dialogue brings key actors together to discuss and conceptualize the framework for sustainable food supply for the city, the country, and the global arena. What I'm focusing on is based on sessional paper number 1 of 2012, titled National Food and Nutrition Security Policy. And in this, I'm going to highlight just a few key factors within the actors and interactions along the food value chain. And one, looking at Nairobi, one of the key elements we need to discuss as we look at the governance is the production. We know the city of Nairobi has a population of about 4.5 million people, constituting about 10% of the national population. But the production of crops, livestock, fish, and other aspects constitutes around 2 to 18%, depending on the kind of food we are talking about. Yet, when you look at the contribution of the city, in terms of the GDP, is about 60%, meaning that when you look at the two factors, the production and consumption, if we are to use the GDP, do not match. And therefore, much of the production comes from outside the county, the city one. And when you look at the sessional paper, it lists some of the counties which link Nairobi in this production, like Kiambu, for those who are aware of the surrounding counties, Kiambu, we have Kajiado, we have Machakos, and we have other far-reaching counties like Kisii, Kisumu, and Mombasa because of the fish and horticulture. The other key elements we need to consider is the transportation of the food products into the city, looking at the interplay between the production and the infrastructure development from the counties, from outside the city, and even within where food is processed from within the county. Then we look at the processing aspects. Processing of aspect where some food is brought into the city, it has to be processed. Other foods are brought directly from the producers directly to the market. Then of key importance is the distribution of this food, distribution of food and storage. We know food is stored either in warehouses, in markets, or in stores, etc. We'll look at the elements of the distribution of the facilities for storage of food before it is distributed to the consumers. The other key element to consider during the dialogue are the consumption patterns, because consumption patterns will affect production, it will affect dietary issues, it will affect the food safety and quality. But there's also another key component which I've seen, which will be of key importance during this dialogue, the disposal of the food, where we realize a lot of food, because of the storage and processing, a lot of food goes to waste. But I've realized, and this is coming after this presentation, we need to look at the governance of the food systems. After you look at the key factors of the production, distribution, processing, and consumption, we look at the regulatory framework, the key actors of the regulatory framework along the food value chain. The national government, which formulates the policies, the statutes, and the regulations, and then the institutional framework for compliance or enforcement. And these things are a key aspect on transaction costs. And therefore, the accessibility and affordability of the food along the value chain. It also brings into focus issues of the protection of the producers, and more so the consumer rights and the consumer protection, where government institutions are very crucial. At the same time, the civil society plays a very key role, and particularly to areas where people do not have access, direct access to government institutions, particularly in the formal settlements. Knowing Nairobi has about 60% of the population in the informal settlements. Then during the discussion, we look at how this value chain system contributes to food security, which is a key component in the 4 agenda for the government. Food security. The other one, which is interrelated, is manufacturing. Knowing Kenya is primarily an agricultural economy. And therefore, food security or value chain contributes a lot to manufacturing. More so on this other agenda of universal access to universal primary care system because of the nutritional aspects. And therefore, I'm sure if we look at these governance issues, particularly the regulatory framework, it will shed light on policy issues as we discuss the food system in the city towards achieving a sustainable, safer, and affordable food for the city, the nation, and the world at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kathenge, for that. And really, what I hear you saying, and this is something that a lot of cities have been asking, is how can Nairobi feed itself? And how can it feed itself at the same time ensuring that livelihoods are growing, that there is still economic development happening, but then also on a critical note, we're still meeting our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think this is something that we have to put at the back of our minds, as you said, as you're going through the discussion, really answering that critical question: how can Nairobi feed itself? You know, considering that it's a fast-growing metropolis, and it's the population is very much growing. Issues of inequality are there within the city, but then also issues around the city being able to produce and provide access of food to its citizens. So thank you very much for that opening and for also contextualizing for us. And I think at this point is where we also try to learn from what are other cities doing, you know, because we are all faced with almost the similar challenges trying to feed our citizens sustainably, you know. So I'd like to take this opportunity to invite Mr. Guven, who is a councillor to the mayor from Izmir Metropolitan Municipality in Turkey. You know, Izmir has been very active in terms of urban food governance, and there's a lot of initiatives that Mr. Guven will share with us around what is happening in Izmir towards attaining sustainable, towards attaining food security, but then also the SDGs. Welcome, Mr. Guven.
Thank you very much, Solafina. I would like to first of all thank to you and the entire team in Nairobi for giving us the opportunity to share what we are doing in Izmir in terms of food security and developing a sustainable agriculture policy. I'm working for the Izmir Metropolitan Municipality, but as previous speakers said, to develop our agriculture and food policy, we are working very closely with the producers, with producer cooperatives, with the civil society organizations, with other governmental organizations, as well as with the private sector. So the whole thing is carried out in cooperation, in coordination with all the stakeholders in the province. I think this is a key, first of all, a key method, key approach to make a success on the issues what we are discussing. So while we are designing our food and agriculture strategy, we identified four major problems. One issue was the rural poverty. Because we have a declining rural population in Turkey, like many other countries around the world. Although our province, to give you an idea, Izmir has 4.5 million citizens. It's the third largest province of Turkey, and its size is nearly 1/3 of Belgium, or nearly half of Belgium. So it's quite a big region. To make it easier to you to conceptualize the scale we work. So the first issue was the rural poverty. We have a declining rural population, although we have very fruitful, very viable lands in our province. They are being fastly abundant. And even if they are not abundant, we know that the rural population, our producers, are no longer making meaningful profit from what they're doing. So that is one problem we identified. We want to save our rural population and support our farmers. The second problem was, although there is some production is going on and increasing, the product types which are being produced and increasing were not the ones which are best for climate. It seems our water resources and biodiversity associated with agricultural areas is depleting very fast. And if we go on like this, our province as a Mediterranean landscape is going to have very soon severe water shortage problems and decline of biodiversity. So that was the second big problem. So the current increasing production pattern, product types like the cattle milk, for instance, is being increasing, is not the best one for our climate and for our natural resources. So that was the second problem in the rural area. When we come to the city part, because Izmir is a metropolitan city with a vast hinterland, we identified here also two different problems. One is the urban poverty, because we have a very, very big, poor, severely poor population. We are a reasonably rich city of Turkey, but on one hand, we have a significant population which suffers from poverty and has limited access to healthy food and enough food. So that was the third problem we identified. But on the other hand, the other issue was more economically powerful people of our province would have severe difficulties to reach. I mean, they had the money, but they have not the possibility to reach healthy, organic, and biodiversity-friendly food. So there is a huge demand for that, but people are not getting it from, these people are not getting it from local producers, but they buy imported Italian food, European food, or whatever. So we also have a quite a significant economically advanced community, which is currently buying these valuable, healthy biodiversity products, but they have no access to that, although these products are being produced in our countryside. So it's a quite challenging situation. Although these four major problems that I listed seems a bit contradictory to each other, having done a problem analysis and designed a strategy, we discovered that actually these problems are solutions to each other. So as one of the previous speakers mentioned, we have decided to handle the food issue, the agriculture issue, not as a standalone issue in the city or in the countryside, but as a whole chain or a product and supply chain of our province. And we have started to document what is going on every step of this production chain. So the first step was we have done first time a very fine scale inventory. This is still going on of our province, what is being produced in our city and what climate friendly production, agricultural food production potential has the city of Izmir. So we have first started doing that. So to identify the actual potential, actual production, and the potential of our province of food supply. And then we started to work with the producer cooperatives, directly with the producers to identify their concerns, their problems, their bottlenecks, to boost biodiversity, climate friendly, but also economically valuable food production. So we started to work with them. And then we have we are about to open an office, but we already started these services, just an office specifically for branding, for packaging of local products, and then an export and selling experts office we are now opening, which is going to help the producers how they will be able to reach the market in Turkey, in Izmir, and elsewhere outside Turkey. And then we give them direct advice on producing their products in high standards. So basically, we have started to regulate the whole system. And in terms of city people, we identify two major strategies. One is that in Turkey, could be the same for Africa, the government and the municipalities are giving food supply directly to the poorest communities. So the municipality has started to buy the products directly from the local producers, and we have started to give high priority to those products which are produced in a climate-friendly way. Like in the near past, we have been giving to the poor communities goat milk free to support their livelihoods. But now we are gradually changing it to goat and to sheep meat. This is still source of protein, but sheep meat can be produced in a very climate-friendly way in our climate. So we are shifting from heavy carbon footprint cattle milk slowly and gradually to sheep meat to give our people. So at one hand, we are preserving the rural community by doing this example because they make more profit out of sheep production. We save the climate and we keep giving healthy food to poor communities in our city. When it comes to the other angle, to the richer communities of our city, we have started to work with the trade organizations, with the export organizations of our province, because we are at the same time a harbor city, and we have started to identify new marketplaces for our healthy products, because we know that within Turkey and outside Turkey there is huge demand to natural products, to fair products. So we are now working with, on one hand, the producers, but on the other hand, on the exporters and traders as a local government, to regulate the whole system. Because currently everybody is doing their best, but they're not basically talking to each other and working a part of a whole production cycle. What we do is basically only to bring together what already exists. We are not, doing a huge investments or huge revolutionary things. We are just bringing together what already exists in our province in a way they can positively interact with each other, because currently they are negatively interacting each other. We think that a municipal government can play a huge role in regulating the food production. We are not producers, we are not exporters, we are not the private sector, none of it, but we can only help these people to talk to each other, because the rural communities in our villages do not have access, or they do not know the regulations for exporting or for marketing. We are basically working as a translator between the two communities until we have this system fully operational. When it is operational, we already started to see the outcomes. Our ultimate goal is to have a nature positive production in our city, which combats poverty. So I can summarize the whole vision. What we are doing is to have a nature positive food production system which combats poverty. Poverty meaning rural poverty, it's a different thing, and the urban poverty. But the solution to combat with both different types of poverties when it comes to food production is actually the same. To make the circle, it's really it's astonishing, because on one hand the producers in the plain need fertilizers, and they buy chemical fertilizers which is imported, but on the other hand the mountainous communities have a very high quality natural fertilizers, sheep out of sheep or out of goat, and they don't have a market to that. And they just don't know the way how they are going to get rid of from that. So it's really crazy. So what we only do is bring these different needs together and to function as a cycle. Of course,
Mr. Governor, I would like to request that you summarize in the next 1 minute.
Sure. This is the last sentence. Of course, what I'm selling is a strategy. It cannot deliver results in a day. It is a process. But I think, as I said in my first sentence, if we can develop the right coalition to implement the strategy, ultimately the results are taking place gradually. I would like to thank you once again for inviting our city and me to participate in this very important meeting. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much, I think, for your insightful talk. And in a way, you highlight some of those similarities that are coming out, issues of urban poverty, of rural poverty, but then how we are combating that, how you're combating that locally. And you also, I think, challenge us as different food system stakeholders. Do we know what is happening along the food value chain? Do we know who is carrying out different activities? Who are the stakeholders involved? You know, can we be able to map our food system comprehensively to know what is happening and then do a bit of matchmaking? So I think that is one challenge that I would like to also put forward to everyone present here. Do we know what is happening in our food system? And are we able to use that information to make the right linkages? Thank you very much, Mr. Governor.
One last thing, I shared the link of a food dialogue, which will take in Izmir on 11th of June. You can link and get more information. It's about nature positive production to alleviate poverty. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Guven. And I would like to please invite you, if you can stay any longer, please do join some of our discussion groups. I think it will be valuable to also share in the discussion groups, if you can stay with us longer. Yeah.
Half an hour more, I'll be with you.
All right, no, thank you very much. So I'd like to invite Dr. Maingi from the Kenya Food Rights Alliance. I'd like to request that keep the presentation to at most 8 minutes, and to really tease out the key points on the role of civil society, and as well as other food system stakeholders in the food system. Thank you very much.
Okay, unmute. Thank you so much. I missed a lot of the presentation by Guken, and hopefully I'll catch it soon. In terms of civil society role in the city of Nairobi, we do recognize that sustainable food systems must include nutrient-sensitive programs. And so nutrition is key to what we are doing. We also recognize that in terms of Nairobi and urban agricultural farming, we need to put in the idea of safety, especially of food, recognizing that as we green the city, we need to incorporate climate change and resilience practices in urban agriculture. And this can only be possible, especially reaching out to the marginalized and the poor, by giving access to a bit of the public land, especially in schools, for some of these people. And there are regulations, Bwana Kithenge, within the city council, within the city government bylaws and laws that prevent people from doing runoff, using runoff for agriculture. And in so doing also, we want, and as CSOs, to be involved in other bills, both at the national and also at the county level, mainly the vendor bill and the agricultural bill. So regreening Nairobi is a good idea. This picture shows some of the work that the Nairobi Metropolitan has been doing with partners elsewhere, and it's beginning to look very good. So when we do all this, we are improving the health of everybody. However, food will always be there. We can have all the good cities, and food becomes critical. So what exactly do we mean by a sustainable food system? I'm glad that the Kithenge mentioned about sustainable production. Also harvesting, processing is very important. So both all these systems are cumulative and will deliver health, economic, environment, and social benefits to the communities. So in terms of the marginalized in Nairobi, we do recognize also that this picture shows street boys who are turning into street men. They need jobs. They need a sustainable way to deal with this, so that the green in the city also looks better for all of us. And so we hope that there'll be a truly multi-stakeholder platform that is fully participatory and should include looking at policies that are aimed at redressing fairness and justice in food access, especially for marginalized people like these ones. And so we as the CSOs are the forefront to fight hunger in mostly the agricultural programs that we are supporting, CSOs and others. But we also need to look at other laws that are within the department. I caught Guken's presentation a little bit. And as we look at street vendors and all that, there are other ways that we can utilize the SDG number 11 and 12, especially on solid waste management. And one of the things is to involve those that are marginalized, the slums and the street boys, in making natural fertilizers that would help them in doing sustainable agriculture that is affordable. So when we look at Nairobi and finding innovations that would drive food system change, there is the whole area and aspect of food waste reduction. Using solar-powered cold storage and solar drying is something that we as CSOs can come in very well, whether we're talking about the vibandas and all, but we also need to find a way of funding nutritive sensitive agriculture and consumption, both education and production. And whether we talk about infrastructure that enables families to grow a percentage of their food and eat locally, food that is grown locally, the money goes back to the local farmers. So in this picture here, I'm showing what I'm pointing at. These are chapatis that are made from colored maize, which is very important for farmers' resilience. And so as I finish, yes, as we talk about food that is safe, we need to work with all the stakeholders instead of criminalizing them, because when that happens, we end up sharing the food. And one other thing, this is Korogosho, the first picture here, the green spaces. They are looking very nice, and you can see the before and the after picture, but we've forgotten that food spaces are important. So would it be nice to have all this greenery also covered with food that is managed by these people living in this slum area, and it is replicated all over the city. These people can actually use this public space to grow food that they can co-own while keeping the city green and owned. Sorry for the short time, but thank you so much. I appreciate even the inclusion, and I look forward to working with the city, county government in all aspects as we represent other CSOs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mayinji, for that. And I think you really remind us the important role of different stakeholders, because from our different positions, we see different elements, we interact with different elements across the food system that are really important, that may not be perceived by different stakeholders. So really having that multi-level platform that brings in all these different voices is really key, especially if we are looking at long-term governance, long-term resilience of the food system. So thank you very much for that. And right now, I'd like to say that we're going to really the reason why we're here, to have the interaction, to have the discussions. I can see, Joram, you have your hand up. Maybe we can please switch on your camera or unmute, and then you can ask your question or make your comment. Thank you very much. Joram, can you unmute yourself? I can see you have your hand up.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Welcome to the dialogue.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Odiema from Kenya Consumers Organization. And I'm very much listening to what is being said. But my question to everybody who has talked is, everything that is being told is in context. Do we have it in the ground? Do we have whatever they are saying in the ground? Because Dr. Maingi has talked, everybody has talked, but what do we have in the ground? Like in Nairobi, we have that issue of the food. But I'm not seeing exactly whether it is happening or not, or what exactly is happening in this forum right now. Are we trying to get something that we will get later on? Or do we have something that we have right now? That's my question. Before I go into the into the meetings.
Thank you very much, Joram, for that. And you really ask quite a pertinent question. And originally, when I envisioned this platform, I think I would like to hand over to also Mr. Kathenge to really add on to this. Is that once we envision this, when we envision this platform, it's to really understand what is already happening, what initiatives are already there, but then where does the opportunity lie? And this is from the view of the multi-stakeholders that are present here. Where does the opportunity lie in driving sustainability of a food system, in ensuring that the city is able to achieve its vision? So I'd like to also hand over to Mr. Kathenge.
Thank you very much, Madam. I think as we engage in this dialogue, if we are to be productive, if we need to be candid, but also very positive, because that's the only way we can have stakeholders on board. Otherwise, if you look like we are theorizing and covering things, it may not help us. I'll go straight to the question which has been asked by that participant. Are these things on the ground in the city? Let me be candid. When you look at agriculture, it's not viewed as one of the key activities of a city. We know that. And particularly in developing countries, agriculture is always rated at the bottom. So what people see are houses, offices, industries. And if you ask them if they need food, they'll go and buy from the shops. So our policies have lagged behind in terms of addressing the agricultural sectors in our cities, and particularly in Nairobi. So we find the people who are in agriculture being at the marginalized platform. And these are things we need to address. Because even when we look at it, as we talk about 60% of our economy being agricultural, how do we view it in terms of perception? Because it's very critical. So I'll be very candid. Much of it is not on the ground. So we need to engage and find ways of making sure that we are strongly footed on the ground addressing the issues. And as I conclude, Madam, if you allow me, I will need to borrow from the other presenters, and particularly from the gentleman from Turkey. I've looked at our concept paper, and it has 19 acts affecting the food system value chain. We need to find out whether it is the same thing in the other countries and whether the acts, in Kenya, when you look at it across the board, we feel like to solve problems, we need to have laws after laws after laws. Do they add value, or they're adding transaction costs, and therefore food accessibility and affordability? So we can as well learn from the government some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kathenge, for that. And I hope, Joram, your question has been answered. And I would like to also request that, Mr. Kathenge, you please get in touch with Guven from Izmir.
Okay.
Yes. A message in the chat to him. This can really open up quite rich discussions and also sharing between you and whatever is happening elsewhere. So please, let's make use of this networking session to really open up some of these conversations with other municipalities.
Thank you.
Right. No, thank you very much. So at this juncture, I think we're going into the discussion room, and I would like to encourage us to really bring out some of these issues as questions, as responses to the key questions. And at this point, we have 5 questions that we would like to really have a discussion around. And as you can see on the shared screen, would like to request you to please rename yourself. If you're interested in question 1, please rename yourself. For example, your name, Solofina Nekesa, rename yourself to Solofina Nekesa breakout room 1, which is B1, so that you are allocated to that breakout room. But then, so we'll give around 30 seconds for the renaming to happen, or if not, drop your name in the chat and what breakout room you would like to be attached to. If it's regard to question 1, say question B1. If it's question 2, say B2. If it's question 3, say B3, and so on. In that way, we're able to place you where you can contribute to the discussions. So I'll give this 30 seconds, and then my colleague Sinetemba is in the process of allocating the breakout rooms right now, and then we'll be able to go into the different breakout rooms in 1 minute. Okay, welcome back to the plenary. I think just to check in, how were the discussions? Dr. Alice, is that a raised hand? How were the discussions?
Yeah, they were, but we didn't quite well finish. We needed more time.
Who didn't finish? Do we need another dialogue for this?
No, we didn't. We our question was combined, number 1 and number 2. So I think we didn't allocate enough time for question 2.
All right, absolutely. No, we'll keep that in mind. But then also just to let you know that the discussion sheet is still open, and if there are other additions that you'd want to make to the Google document, please feel free to do that even after this meeting. But okay, thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, if the members, maybe at the end of it, we'll tell the members to contribute also. Everybody to contribute so that everybody is in the know. Thank you so much.
All right, no, but thank you for that and for leading the room together with Daniel.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comment? Which group did not stick to the questions, but they found themselves sort of discussing other issues, but related to the question?
I think a lot of these issues are cross-cutting. So as much as you are looking at something in specific, you end up having to put in something from policy, put in something from some another section. So probably when you combine everything, they enrich each other. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think we also did come across that in our group. You know, the conversations were so rich, we couldn't stop to just the question that we were assigned. Winnie?
That is actually true. Like when we joined this now plenary, I hear Felicitas was talking about waste, food waste. And in our session, we had just talked about food waste. So indeed, the issues are the same. Even when we try and break them down to the different thematic areas, you realize that one issue is an issue everywhere. So, and that is an essential why we are doing the food system approach, because when you want to address food and nutrition security, you realize that you cannot do it in a silo. You need all these other moving parts to work together. You can't just tackle one end and say you have fixed the problem, but you really need to fix issues in all these related areas. Yes.
No, absolutely. I think that's very insightful. Winfred?
Thank you so much. We have had a good time in breakout 4. Although the time was limited, we didn't really exhaust the discussion. But as you're saying, I think we need to access the document even after, so that because we have written it short form, so that we can clarify some of those issues. Because once we write them on point form, the person compiling on the other side may not really get the full concept of the meaning of that. Otherwise, we have had a good time. But next dialogue, I think 30 minutes, 45 minutes will do.
No, we'll keep that in mind. I think we'll really have to give more space for the conversations happening. But thank you very much for all the discussions in the breakout rooms. So now we would like to really call upon representatives from the different breakout rooms to take 3 minutes to highlight the key points. And remember, here we're focusing on action-oriented outcomes. You know, what are those key actions that are coming out of your discussions? And I think because we really trap ourselves in problems, but we're not empowering local governments, we're not empowering actors in how to move forward. So I'd like to call upon someone from breakout room 1 to please give us a response.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. Can Daniel please do it for us? He was the one doing the writing. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Solofina?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Just a brief summary of what our discussion revolves around. So we addressed two questions. The first one was asking about how the vision of the Nairobi City County Food System Strategy align with the UN goals for urban communities. And so essentially, there is the argument that the food system as it is presently is not delivering enough positive outcomes, and that, of course, indeed, the strategy reflects SDG 2, which is to end hunger, but that some few things are missing. And the issue was that many of the bills mentioned in the strategy do not align to the strategy. And so it suffers essentially from incoherence. And so the bills that were mentioned, they said we should look at the strategy and see that there are alignment between these bills mentioned in the strategy and the strategy itself. Also, elements of sustainability, it was emphasized that this should be looked at, that it should be strengthened in the strategy in terms of environmental sustainability. And the second question, how can these strategies and actions in the, how can it better be supported? And what came out strongly was that we have to include SDG 12, which focuses on consumption and production patterns, that we cannot always depend on food coming from afar, but we must encourage urban and peri-urban production. Essentially, it revolves around the principles of sustainability, how we can reduce negative externalities that comes from transportation of food from far distance, and basically to support production, urban production, or urban agriculture within Nairobi, so that all of these negative externalities can be reduced. I guess that's my take from I don't know if Dr. Alice wants to add further to that.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I think also there was a mention of the agriculture bill and the street vendors bill, which don't seem to agree on which counter each other. And I think we'll take time to look at the bills and see how the two can work out together to achieve food security. And I think we also mentioned that, and which Dr. Karugu answered was, we look at the informal settlement, and there is a whole chapter on the low income communities. And if people go through that, we can be able to see that they are well captured and well taken care of. And then we also encourage members to go through again. We did not have time to finish, especially the second question. So if you are able to go through the strategy, we still need feedback from you so that we can improve on the strategy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Daniel and Dr. Ruto. So I would like to also call upon everyone present here that please.
I think so. I think we also talked about the fact that let's not make it out. Let it Kenyanize it.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Let's make it in home. Let's do it where we are.
Okay. Do we understand what that means, everyone? That how do we really adapt this strategy to the local conditions in Kenya so that it particularly speaks to the challenges, to the opportunities within Nairobi County?
Yeah, thank you. I think if Daktari can go through the strategy, there's so much that there is in it. It's only that we had a short time, but there's quite a bit that can answer his questions. And it's only that, the food system strategy is there. I mean, there is a food system, but it is not structured. And that's why we want, through the strategy, to have it structured to ensure that there is food sufficiency. And of course, nutritious.
No,
so welcome remarks to enrich this document. There's so much. This is just draft 4.
Yeah.
And we still need your input. Thank you, members.
No, absolutely. And I've posted a link in the chat where you can go to where the call for comments has been posted. So please take time to go look at the strategy and provide the feedback to the county, provide the necessary feedback to the county so that they can be able to develop this, as someone says, into a Nairobi strategy. So with those, I'd like to ask someone from breakout 2 to please summarize some of the outcomes from your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Solofina. In group 2, we were talking about the different, it's still part of the strategy, but what are the additional ideas, solutions on partnerships or action plans that can be adopted or introduced to realize the overall objectives of a sustainable urban food system. So there was a lot of rich discussion and short time to discuss it, but I tried to capture as much as possible. Unfortunately, we were not able to record the proceedings as we were going along, but I hope I captured them in writing. So one is to just check the different components that there's sustainability in terms of being able to protect the economic, the environmental, and social components of sustainability of future generations that will be occupying the space when we live. I'm sure in 100 years we'll all have left. So what will we have left behind for the future generations? So it captures across the grid for production, transport, at the consumer level, whether it's the climate change components or whether it is the waste management of foods, whether it's in the market or in the homes. So we need to have that properly captured within the strategy. 2 is to have partnerships with urban planning. And I think this is a department within the city county government, including architecture, where food production areas are set aside, having urban zoning to allow for farming. There may have been some, what are they called, bylaws, which may or may not have captured that, but I know there's also an Urban Food System Act, Urban Food Agriculture Act, I think that came into effect not so long ago. So just having the architectural city planners to mainstream open spaces for urban farming and kitchen gardens. We also had about the city, an idea for the city to negotiate with the Kenya Railways for upcoming infrastructure so that there is provision of cold storage within the rail system or within the carriage of the trains to allow for transport of foods that is not spoiling along the way. Another point was to include consumers in the development of policies, of strategies, of guidelines, just to have a closed feedback loop, including the consumers in the decision making before coming up with a strategy, so that it's a like bottom-up approach. For example, the issue of street food vending, which is not well encouraged, but we have food buyers encouraging the street vendors to keep on the process, to keep up the selling of foods on the street. So is there a way of capturing the needs of both the vendors and the buyers to have safe food production and safe sale of foods on the streets? So both matters of food safety and environmental sustainability. Then we were challenged as a city to have and to empower the small scale farmers in production of foods, whether it is livestock production, whether it is in the general food production. The extension workers in the agriculture sector were challenged to disseminate the relevant technologies to the farmers at the ground level. I think that is where Joram keeps asking, are these things happening on the ground? So that is a challenge taken. Then having an inclusive governance system for the food systems, I think that has been mentioned previously, just the participatory processes by different stakeholders, bringing them on board from the very beginning, so that as the development of the strategy is happening of the different governance processes, then there's ownership and acceptability by the general population. We would also want to capture public-private partnerships on how different private institutions, organizations can feed into the production or processing or transport loop through provision of capital or different technologies that will empower the different players along the system. We also challenged to look at both the challenges and the opportunities in just like a summary, capture the challenges and the opportunities along the food system, whether it is in production, whether it is in processing, whether it is in the transport area, to be able to see what can be invested in, whether it is monetary or resources, different resources given into the different processes, whether it is policy and regulation, how government sector, how the non-government sector, whether it is the CSOs, the civil society organizations can feed into the different processes within the food system. Second last, we're challenged, I know we have different partners or different sectors of the government working on infrastructure, but then they still need to improve infrastructure from where food is produced, that is the farms, whether it is out of Nairobi or within Nairobi, to where the consumers are or within the markets. So just the general improvement of the infrastructure to ensure little or no waste of food before it gets to the consumers. So just the general improvement of whether it's cold storage or the roads, that needs to be done. Last but not least, on food waste management, linkages with farmers. For example, we have a lot of biodegradable waste within our market areas, as much as it is just there, which may be up to 70% of the waste that is produced can be gotten to the farmers for recycling to happen, for manure production or for feeding of animals within the markets, or sorry, within the farming community, to be able to reuse the waste that is produced within the markets or within our homes. I think that was it for me. I hope I have represented our group adequately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. And I think here the question is back to the county. Do you take up the challenge? You know, maybe you will tell us as we're closing the dialogue. You know, are you ready to take up the challenge? So I'd like to invite someone from Group 3, from Breakout Room 3, to please share some of the outcomes.
Thank you. This is Bessie Nikozi. I was facilitating Group 3. As I mentioned earlier, that we spoke across some of the areas, but our question was, how can the capacities and capabilities of Nairobi City County government and local stakeholders be built to carry on, extend, and identify opportunities to achieve an urban food system that is inclusive, resilient, including withstanding shocks such as COVID-19. And one of the key things that we realized was that this is not something that can be done by the department alone. So first, to make sure that we are mapping existing urban capacities plus actors, and looking at how we can coordinate across departments, coordinate with civil society actors, other counties. As you've heard, only 20% of the food comes from Nairobi County, so other counties, private sector actors, and also researchers, because that was one of the areas that we saw would be important in terms of building capacities. And something else that came up was that we already have many policies that are already in existence, and they're good policies. However, we need to focus more now on implementation. So if there are any capacity gaps that are existing, that would allow that, if those gaps are filled, would allow better implementation of those policies, then we need to look into that. However, we cannot fill gaps without knowing which gaps do exist. So as we are mapping existing capacities, looking at having a very in-depth contextual analysis that actually identifies the capacity gaps, which we will focus on when we are doing the system strengthening. And look both on the supply side of things and the demand side of things, because during our discussion we also saw that some of these services are very demand driven, and the communities might not even know that they exist. For example, extension workers. A lot of people don't know that in Nairobi there are extension services available. So looking at the barriers from the demand side, and then looking at the capacity gaps from the supply side, and then focusing the capacity building and the and strengthening capabilities on those particular gaps. And there was a mention also on target on like the existing capacities might need a bit of targeted professional development to be able to use certain approaches that will build the food system. For example, use of climate smart agriculture, and ways of working that actually build resilience of the communities. So there might be some professional or capacity development that is required for example, for the extension workers and so forth. On that as well, looking at the targeted professional development efforts, I think there is a need to also include some succession plans and in the hiring and the capacity building, because we are seeing that there might be a gap in terms of a lot of the teams that were originally there, maybe going into other spaces, other development spaces, or exiting to retirement. So there's a lot of attrition. So once building capacities, you also look at succession in case these capacities leave, then what happens after that? And the other thing we looked at was that shocks really disrupt food distribution in Nairobi, because a lot of the food comes from external sources. So looking at production in Nairobi, in the urban centers, and incentivizing farmers to actually do the production here. So lowering taxes, innovative ways of doing the farming, like household hanging gardens, etc. County support in terms of extension services and farmer support, subsidies. Some of these things are there and they're very strong in rural areas, but not in the urban areas. Another thing that came up was food aggregation, looking at investors to do food aggregation so that we can have food aggregated within the county for local consumption. A lot of the aggregation that is happening right now is for external, for export, but for local consumption. So also that would mean that having investors or maybe private sector involvement. And encouraging, finally, we're looking at making sure that we have strategies to monitor and contingency plan, have early warning systems and components to be able to monitor the food chain as well, and to be able to respond early in case of looming shocks. I'm just touching very lightly. We had very in-depth discussions, but I think that covers most of it. We'll add the rest in the on the paper. Thanks.
All right. So thank you very much, Bessie, for that. And also love to encourage the different members that were part of the discussion group to also use the chat function as well as add more inputs onto the paper. So then quickly, I would like to move to group 4. Please do try to summarize in 3 minutes, and then we can move to group 5, and then we really come back to understanding what are some of those key things coming out of our discussion today. Group 4.
Thank you so much. I'm Winfred Katumo. I was chairing breakout 4. We were talking about the transformation of stakeholders who can bring transformation in the food system. Who are those stakeholders, and what are their needs and their requirements? And one thing we have realized is that many people had not gone through the strategy. So we took a bit of time discussing, but we were able to discuss about some of the key stakeholders who can bring transformation in the food system in the city. And the first one was bringing in the urban and peri-urban farmers with the innovations, because we are looking at the production. We want to boost the production. So we need to bring these people on board. They need to be capacity built. And amongst them, we have the good innovators who can also help in capacity building. Number 2, we had somebody from one of the major markets of Ukulima. And we also talked about improving the market infrastructure in the city. And here we talked about having warehouses in our major markets, and also having cold rooms, because Nairobi is receiving a lot of foods from around the neighboring cities or counties. So we need to have capacity to store this food. Those are the warehouses and the cold rooms. And the people who can do this, we have said the government, that is the national government, the county government. We also have the private, even we were told even the traders. Traders can also come in and try to improve the infrastructure. And also the donors, they can also help in improving that infrastructure in the markets. We have also looked at the major and micro industries in the city, whereby these are major marketing channels, because the food we are producing in Nairobi and the food which is coming into Nairobi, we need these major and micro industries, so that those people who are producing, they are assured that the market is there. And once they are assured the market is there, then the motivation of even producing more will be there, and we shall be towards attaining food security in Nairobi. Another major stakeholder who we thought can bring transformation in the food system are the financial institutions within the city. And these financial institutions, they are key because they can finance. They can finance the producers, they can finance the transporters, they can finance even the processing people, they can finance even the consumers. So these are all round stakeholders who are so very key, and they need to be brought on board so that they can bring transformation in the food system. Second last, we have also talked about very key, the consumer. we have seen that in most cases, consumers may be forgotten, and yet they are very, very key. And this one, we have talked about women and the children, because even as we look at the food security, we are looking at the nutrition bit of it. And we have realized that women and children are very key when it comes to food. And once they are capacity built on the nutrition bit and even the handling bit because we are also looking at the food safety, then we need to bring them on board so that they can bring transformation in the food system in Nairobi. Yeah, I think we have also talked about processing and agro-processing. That is the last one, strengthening the processing and agro-processing in the city. This one, we have said that this is very key because the markets are receiving a lot of food, and some is sold while it's fresh. Other foods can be value added through the processing and agro-processing. And these ones, they need capacity building. Again, capacity building can come from the national government, the county governments, and also from the private and from everyone. So again, we need to strengthen these people so that we don't lose a lot of food at the marketplace. We don't lose a lot of food while transporting. We don't lose a lot of food while producing. Anyone from B4 would like to add something?
And can I request that they add in the chat or in the onto the discussion paper so that we can give some room for room 5, for breakout room 5 to give the outcomes, and then we can sort of summarize after this.
Thank you.
All right. No, thank you very much, Winfred. So Felicitas, this is over to you in 3 minutes. Please let us know the outcomes for the group 5 discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Solofina. Thank you, Solofina. From our group, we didn't have so much time to discuss what everyone had, but we'll add it on the discussion paper. But the question we were handling is, as food system stakeholder, how is our work contributing towards a resilient and inclusive Nairobi urban food system, and how can the county support? Not so much came out, but what really stood out is on food safety and food affordability. And one thing that came out is that the Ministry of Agriculture is doing something on conservation of fisheries at the production points in Nairobi to limit exploitation of aquatic resources and the quality of safe food. And they do a lot of capacity building. And one of the things that came out that they can get support from the county was on supporting value chain and supporting value chain linkages, financing for trade, adequate fish to consumers, and streamlining information and communication channels. And also one thing that really came out was the fact that Ministry of Agriculture will conduct, instead of the county government supporting the Ministry of Agriculture, this time around is the Ministry of Agriculture will support the county by conducting a training to them. One thing that also came out around food safety was the issue of pesticides and the fact that Nairobi really gets a lot of food from the different counties, and the food that comes into the county is food that is already contaminated with high levels of pesticides. And one thing that the county government can do is strengthen monitoring systems on the use of pesticides and basically increase data collection on the samples from the markets. And the government can also link farmers to consumers, farmers who do sustainable practices, and support farmers who practice agroecology. The last thing that really came out from the conversation was on food pricing and the fact that people are not hungry because there's no food, but people are hungry because they can't really afford food. And that is something that the government can really pick up and see what they can really do. We'll add more on the recommendations that the government can do in the discussion paper. Lastly, one thing that also came out was on food waste and the fact that a lot of food waste is wasted in the market. Why not make use of that food? Why not make use of that and regenerate our soils by having a compost center in the markets whereby all the food that has been wasted can be collected and can be taken back to our farms? Thank you. If I left anything, anyone from my group can add on the chat. And if you're from my group and you didn't contribute, you can also add on the discussion paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felicitas, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for participating in the discussions and for also offering your inputs, really guided from the areas of work that you're coming from. And I think the challenge now, which I don't know if I will do justice, is to be able to bring all these discussions into a common area where we're identifying some of the key issues pulling through all the different discussions, right from our presentations at the start, but then also some of these issues that are sort of presenting a common thread across the discussion rooms. And then after this, I'll really hand over this to FAO, who are organizing the national dialogue, and to really let us know how some of these outcomes will feed into the national dialogue processes, and then bring this back to the county, and really just to let them know that these have been the discussions today. You know, how does the county's vision align with some of the priorities identified today, and really what is the roadmap for the county to lead us to some of these priority areas that have been identified. So I think I'll take up the mammoth task of trying to really create the linkages, and then please feel free to add some of this in the chat. So really, from the beginning, we've realized that that the county has a huge task. Well, first of all, trying to feed the growing population. You know, how can the city feed the growing population of Nairobi? And this is a county that literally produces only 20% of this food. So really, the cry today has been to understand what exactly the city is doing at present, but then to also gather input from different stakeholders on how the city can be guided to, first of all, feed its population, but then do it in ways where the city can be able to provide livelihoods for different people, but then also do this sustainably while protecting the environment, and then also meeting the sustainable development goals. And really what's coming out in the discussion, that even if there are a lot of challenges, the city is taking some steps in trying to meet some of these. And it has been noted that there are very many valuable policies that have been drafted by the city county, but really the challenge is how these can be implemented, and how these can be monitored and evaluated, and or how this can be continuously be evaluated to ensure that they deliver the value, or they deliver food security outcomes, they deliver outcomes of resilience, they deliver outcomes of sustainability to the city county. So I think that is one of the challenges that are coming out to the county. How are these very good policies being put into practice? How are they being monitored and evaluated to ensure that they bring back value? And then I think what is strongly coming out as an opportunity for Nairobi City County, but then also one of the areas that really requires a lot of input, it's around shortening the supply chains of food. You know, if the county is depending on 20% of its food, then really coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic with its lockdown regulations, you know, there was lots of shocks to the system. And really this was a wake-up call to not just Nairobi City County, but to different actors around food. You know, how can the city effectively guide the transformation towards shorter supply chains of food? And can this be done through intensifying food production within the city? Or can this be done by really strengthening the linkages between the city and the city region to enable that there is a stable supply of food within the city? And then I think issues around how best technology and infrastructure can be adopted to be able to bring about transformation. And this is infrastructure related to market infrastructure, infrastructure related to mobility infrastructure, and really all these other forms of infrastructure, water, sanitation, that are key to the food system. But then also remembering that, you know, technology did play quite a key role, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what are those areas, even if it's low-tech solutions or high-tech solutions, that can be adopted by the county to ensure that there's supply and access to food, there's stable supply and access to food throughout for over the long term. But I think also most importantly, this is a message that we've seen coming through from Izmir municipality, but then also different stakeholders that have been able to talk today, is that we need to take stock of the food system. You know, identifying who is involved in the food system, where do the synergies lie across the different stakeholders, and how can the food system be effectively governed? So in a way, we govern what we know. So really, how is the city in the process of ensuring that they do understand their food system, that they're making the linkages with the right stakeholders, and really knowing where to move different resources within the food system. So it's really critical that that the city, county, and different stakeholders boldly move towards taking stock of the food system. And then really strongly issues around urban planning and zoning. And I think the challenge for most of our colonial cities is that how do we replan these cities? Cities that are, first of all, strongly show signs of informality. There's informality springing up strongly in the cities. So how do we, as city stakeholders, as Nairobi City County, really boldly start planning to be able to put food at the forefront of zoning, of planning, and access to land and resources for food? So really that came out strongly. And I guess the challenge is to us in a city that is that strongly shows informality, informal trading, informal housing, informal settlements. But then as well as you have industries encroaching on land for agriculture, you have residential developments encroaching on land for agriculture, industrial developments encroaching on land for agriculture. How can the city boldly sort of zone land with agriculture in mind, or with boldly zone land with the idea that different services are linked to agriculture or agricultural production or other activities along the food system? And I think also importantly is understanding that the food governance space is a multi-level stakeholder space. And so that really requires that different stakeholders are brought on board. And interestingly, food is that the city can only control as much, but we have the private sector playing a key role. We have civil society playing a key role, and we have also small-scale farmers playing a key role within the city. You know, are there platforms in place? I think one of our discussants noted that there's a flag steering committee. There's a food liaison action advisory group in place, but is it mandated to support the city in food system governance, in helping the city understand how better it can transform the food system? So those are the 5 key points that have come out of the discussion, and this is really through trying to piece together different conversations. But then really I would like to now take this back to the municipality to really let us know, you know, what are those priorities? Do they align with some of the key issues that have been identified today? But then also moving forward for long-term food system governance, where does the city see itself, you know, in terms of prioritization, in terms of what opportunities to build into, in terms of which stakeholders I would like to work with, so that we have different stakeholders that can plug into some of these opportunities identified. But then before we do that, I think I would like to really invite someone from FAO, an officer from FAO, to please help us also link us to the national or regional processes that are happening around the dialogues, and how some of these outcomes can feed or will feed into that process. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Josephat for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Solofina, for the wonderful presentation, summary of the key messages. Indeed, this has been a very informative discussion since morning when I was listening. And this is going to be very important even going forward. I want to introduce myself. My name is Joseph Kariuki. I work with FAO Kenya, but currently working with Ministry of Agriculture, particularly the National Secretariat on Food System Summit. The Secretariat, as mentioned earlier, is led by the Cabinet Secretary and sitting at the Ministry of Agriculture, and is in charge of coordinating both the national dialogues and the sub-regional dialogue. Given that we have a devolved system of government, so we have the national government and of course 47 counties. But then because of time, we wouldn't be able to have county dialogues. So it was agreed that we're going to have dialogues at sub-regional level. And in our case, there are 6 regional economic blocks, and the Secretariat agreed that we can have the dialogues at this level so that we can enrich the national dialogue that is planned to happen towards the end of June, that is next month. So since Nairobi County specifically does not belong to either of the 6 regional economic blocks, it was agreed that since this independent dialogue, the one that we have participated today, and it has been very, very fruitful, we have seen discussion, ideas, solution, and partnerships already suggested, and also actions that can be taken to shape the national pathways for the discussion that will be happening later on, been very, very important. So FAO particularly is interested or is really making sure that the outcomes of today's discussion can fit into our national dialogue. Remember, at the end of this month, when these different subnational dialogues are expected to happen, we will be asking, or people will be asking, what about the voices of the city? And listening to many presenters earlier today, they were saying that discussions about the urban food systems are usually sidelined, or they are not really given the audience that they're supposed to be given. And that has been very clear. So as FAO, we came in to make sure that these deliberations, the outcomes of today's meeting, will also feed into these other subnational dialogues. And therefore, we are working with a team that has been constituted by the Ministry of Agriculture to make sure that the voices and the discussions, the deliberations and the solutions that have been proposed in today's meeting are also going to be consolidated together with those of the other 6 regions, so that we'll be able to enrich the process at the national level that happens in June, so that we don't lose these voices. Very plausible solutions have been proposed today, and the actions are very much clear, and the partnerships are also very much clear, and they need to feed into that national dialogue so that when we as a country forge ways of improving our food systems, of course, to make sure that our food systems are sustainable and our production and productivity are sustainable, so that at least everybody in the next 10 years or in the future will be able to have access to safe and nutritious food. But this conversation doesn't just stop here. We have actions, ways of implementing these different solutions that we are proposing. So we will be able to report to the National Secretariat and also share these key messages that we have noted today, and of course make sure the voices of the cities, including Nairobi and also Kisumu. We participated in a different independent dialogue. I think Claire was also participating, to make sure that these voices are not lost. We are part of the national debate. We are able to contribute to those pathways. We are able to contribute to these strategic interventions that we already discussed here, so that we can all drive to the same direction and achieve the aspirations of the country, as well as those of the cities like Nairobi. So, Solofina, I want to stop here, but to assure the participants today and everybody who participated that the voices that we have been able to echo today will actually get their way into the national dialogue. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that. And I think really for us is to understand that this is not stopping here, but really it's going to echo through all these different processes. And also just going back to really at local level, is that we have a collection of all these different stakeholders putting their voices forward. So it does give the city an opportunity to also understand really where do the different opportunities lie, or where does the city support, where could the city potentially be able to garner support from different stakeholders present here. So thank you very much for that. And so before I hand over to Mr. Kathenge to close, I would like to invite Dr. Karugu, who has been very instrumental in organizing the dialogue, and to also reflect on the process so far, but then to bring us back to Nairobi County. So Dr. Karugu is the County Directorate of Food System at Nairobi City County, and to really bring us back to the process, where do we move from here, and what is the vision of the city moving forward with regard to food system governance, but then also what direction we are moving with the food system strategy. Thank you.
Just
hearing a lot of reflection from your side.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Karugu, we're hearing a lot of...
Thank you very much, Serafina, for this opportunity to reflect on today's proceedings. Before I give my views about the way forward, I want to appreciate the UN Food System Summit. This was a God-said summit, and this is a God-said event which has demystified the concept of food system. This concept of food system is fairly new. This is a very fairly new term. And in our work, we have had a lot of challenges in explaining the difference between food system, food security, food safety, and this whole dialogue that is happening in the world has demystified this, and now everybody here and everywhere else, they have understood this system approach in achieving food security. So in a way, the whole UN summit has helped us to actually demystify this concept. I also want to thank the summit. Again, it has introduced urgency in policy formulation. We have a very fast-growing city in terms of human population. I think by 2050, depending on the projections, 2050, Nairobi will have 14 million people. That is 3 times the number of people we have now in about 29 years. So in terms of food supply, we need at least to see, or we should be able to be seeing 3 times the volumes and the values of food that we are anticipating to deliver to the city. And there's a huge, huge challenge which has not really been magnified there before, but with this summit, I think everybody now in the leadership of Nairobi City have understood the urgency. We have to sort out these supply demand chains so that as population grows, we also respond to it. Without meeting this supply, there will be deficiencies of food. And with the deficiency, there is price increase and shortages and civil strife. And this is something that we should avoid. Again, I want also to reiterate that the UN summit is calling for new ideas and new solutions. We do things differently. And we in Nairobi, and we in the research, and we in the academia, there is a big, big challenge for us to bring new ideas. The old ideas may not deliver 3 times the volume of food we need. So we need new ideas. So even as we had this dialogue, I think we go back to the drawing board and really give room for new ideas, encourage new ideas, motivate new ideas, incentivize new ideas to give us new solutions. So with respect to the future of this strategy, after today's dialogue, I have a secretariat that is driving this drafting. We will regroup for a day or 2, and we are going to input. First of all, we look at all the feedback that we have got from today's dialogue, and others that you come through the emails, and we identify what everybody have said. We put it in the context of policy and strategy, and we revise this document. And this will be very, very fast. We want to do it very, very fast, so that now we upscale or we submit a final draft to our leaders to adopt it. We have, alongside this document, we have a resource mobilization strategy. Is already in place, done within our secretariat in conjunction with the FAO, and we are waiting to roll out this strategy. So we will not delay in concluding. From the public participation, we will not delay. We will quickly input all the views and reach the document and conclude. As a living document, every 5 years, you'll be revising it every 5 years. So there is room to bring in those new ideas, new solutions, new partnerships. If they are missed in the first document, they can be revised in 5 years. Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karugu, on really letting us know how we are moving forward from here. And I really just want to thank you and for mobilizing the team from Nairobi County to really be present for this dialogue, to really be present to listen to what is being said. And I hope that moving forward, some of these outcomes can guide governance processes or other initiatives moving forward at the county. So thank you very much. And really, I think this is the point where we're coming to the close of our dialogue. You know, it has been a long conversation, but with all good conversations, they all do come to an end. And I would like to hand over to Mr. Kathenge to really close this dialogue, but then to also help us understand, you know, of some of the priorities that have been identified. Really, what is the city prioritizing and how is the city moving forward from here? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm here to get your name. You'll excuse me for not acknowledging you through the name. But
Solofina Nekesa from Italy, Africa. Solofina Nekesa from Italy, Africa.
Solofina, yes. Thank you very much, Solofina. First of all, for that facilitation. And one thing I've realized throughout the process is time management. I think we have tried very much to stick to the time schedule. I'm also assuming, because when I looked at the program, we were supposed to have our CEC member for food and agriculture, that she is not with us. So that as I take this opportunity, I'm not taking her place.
I'm present, but you can conclude, please.
With your blessings, madam.
Yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Okay. So through the governor, who was represented by the acting county secretary at the very beginning during the presentation, and through our CC, Madam Mulwa, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the whole team who have participated in this dialogue, and more so the FAO team, the dialogue participants, and allow me to be subjective. I would like to thank our staff from the agriculture sector, led by Dr. Karugu, as has been said, by mobilizing us. Actually, to a large extent, is the man behind the city county in this process today. And for everyone, if you ask me, today has been a reawakening to me at the personal level, because as I said, I'm participating for the first time, and many issues have been brought up which were not within the realm of my thinking of the importance of agriculture and the food systems in the city. I've spent a lot of time dealing with the urban planning issues. And as I said, when we talk about agriculture, people think of the packaged food, but they don't think about the agricultural systems and the food systems and the importance of food in the city. Knowing that food security for a city population or any population is very important. So I thank everyone who has participated by opening or reopening our minds to the importance of this dialogue. Through the CEC, that I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the county governor, Manda Ann Kananu, and the county government at large, would like to pronounce our commitment to this process and to sort of recommitting ourselves to the process of addressing the issues of food systems in the city. I'm sure I cannot pronounce all of them, but everyone has realized that each and every person in the county government has a key role to play, looking at the whole lot of the factors which affect this food value chain. So we'd like to tell the team that we are very committed, we'll work together. And one of the key areas, because I've been asked to identify our key priority. If you ask me, our policy framework, an institutional arrangement, resource mobilization, and trying to advocate for agriculture in the city county government, in the sector population, in the national government is very paramount. And we need to work on it as a county government. I would also like to point out that I'm encouraged by the statements, by the opinions, by the views expressed by Josephat Karanja from FAO and the Secretariat, that now he has heard our voice and that you will be our ambassador at the Secretariat and wherever forum you will be at, so that we can up the game in the agriculture sector within the county. I wouldn't like to talk much, but if you get an opportunity as participants to look at resource allocation and resource mobilization at the county level, you'll be shocked, because the budget allocation will give you an indication of where we place agriculture sector. And this is an area we also need to work out so that we can address this issue, which has been sort of expressed by one of the participants telling us that we focus so much on the demand-driven service provision rather than looking at the supply side. That's an area we need to work on. And then tied to this is trying to identify, which I'm sure we have, identify our key stakeholders who can help us along this journey. Otherwise, in the overall, thank you very much, participants, the sub-county team, the FAO, Josephat Karanja, and all the other people who participated through this process today. We look forward to meeting you again. Asanteni.
And thank you very much for those encouraging words. And I think really some of us who are here and engaging with Nairobi City County at this level, you know, our eyes have been open to different activities. Our eyes have been open to different initiatives. And in a way, this has been more of a learning opportunity for all of us. But then also I'm trying to find ways to work hand in hand with the city county or with the county government to find ways we can collaborate better to bring about transformation of the food system. So I think I've been advised that if Mr. Msumba is still here with us, that please do give us a word or two of closing in terms of commitment. And sorry, we may take an extra 5 minutes of your time, but please do bear with us as we close this discussion. I'd like to inquire if Mr. Msumba is still present with us.
I think from the list, Mr. Musumba may have exited, but let me take this opportunity by even introducing myself. My name is Lucia Mulo. I'm the current CEC, that is the County Executive Committee member in charge of agriculture, and would want to recommit. As you remember the remarks of His Excellency, the Governor, that is the acting Governor, Ann Kananu, we want to move together. This discussion has really enlightened us, and we are open to more discussion. We would want to commit that we will work with every stakeholder without leaving anybody behind.
we have been enriched a lot, and therefore, for sure, we will be able to improve these documents and implement it in full. And for those who may not have taken opportunity to read, please do read, because I've realized that some of the questions which came up, they actually answered in the document. So let's read so that we are at the same level. And when we call you again for public participation, please join us. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much for that. And I really cannot top any of the key messages that have been put forward. So you have the ear of the local government. And I would really want to call upon you to really make use of a multi-stakeholder platforms and to also make use of all these different initiatives happening to work closer with the city, but then for also the city to provide space for different stakeholders to work with you. So, and I think this dialogue has been one of those avenues to be able to bring different stakeholders together. And I would like to thank you for coming and being a part of this dialogue. I think, and I also want to re-echo the role that FAO Kenya has played in bringing together different stakeholders in organizing the dialogue, as well as FAO Global in supporting the initiative, and then to also my colleagues at ICLEI Africa, but then most importantly, the Nairobi City County government for really providing the space to dialogue. And I think that is one of the beginning pillars of governance. And thank you very much. So with those few words, I would like to close the dialogue. But please do stay in touch over email and other communication channels. Thank you very much for staying with us.